Can you hear me?
I remember going down there. I could ignore one, but then you were, yeah. Johnny was there.
Are you doing live or just taking pictures? Are you doing live? Yeah, like on Facebook Live or? Recording.
You asked me if there was anybody else.
My son was telling me, tell us that. He was very old. Somebody took an ADL truck for
How is that?
much better.
Everyone's satisfied? Welcome everyone to the fifth of our 6 summer talks for the summer of 2025. The summer is just wheeling away from us weekly, and we're now going to have a very interesting talk on the subject of the climate of Prince Edward Island, the historical climate. I'll make a few, I don't think I'll make any announcements at the beginning, other than in case of emergency, the way out is the way you came in, and straight down out through the door rather than through the museum. And the toilets are just across the hallway there. So you are all very welcome this evening. The person that is speaking tonight is a member of the Society and has been since 2012, and he has been on the board during that period, board of the Bedeque Area Historical Society, and he has been our secretary for quite a number of years, going back perhaps to 2015. And I'm going to tell you something about him. I asked him for a CV or resume, and he certainly has provided one. And he's left out the early years, but I will fill them in at the end, but as best I can. Don Jardine, and many of you will know him, is a climate researcher and environmental consultant. He was born and raised on a farm in Freetown, and has a Bachelor of Science degree from UNB and a Master of Science degree from the University of Prince Edward Island. His research thesis was on climate change indicators for Prince Edward Island. He has been involved in climate change research projects, climate data collection and analysis for 15 years. He has conducted climate change vulnerability studies in several communities in Atlantic Canada, including First Nation communities on Prince Edward Island, and he has worked on a variety of climate change issues over the past number of years. Other interests include researching historical climate, weather, meteorological, and phenological events. Now, phenological events are the timing of periodic events in biological life cycles, when trees come into leaf and so on. Another interest is environmental photography, including the aerial photography of the island coastline, and the impacts of extreme weather events and storms. And after any event, such as Fiona, you will find Dawn running about the island trying to photograph and record any disasters that have occurred in terms of road conditions or the shoreline. He co-authored 5 Prince Edward Island weather trivia calendars between 2015 and 2019, which involved research of he tried to fill in every day of the year with some climatic or weather event derived from historical records, and more or less succeeded, I think, in covering the full year, for 5 years as well. And I don't know if he copied from one year to the next or was all new information every year. I collected those, and I'm not sure whether I got the full set or not, but I'll have to check. He is a sessional lecturer at the University of Prince Edward Island, and has recently taught a course on climate change monitoring. Now, going back into his more distant past, I said he was born in Freetown and grew up on a farm in Freetown, And in his younger days, he was a member of the Freetown Historical Society, which produced the 464-page local history, Freetown Past and Present, in 1985. And he is the author of a 2-volume book on the Jardines of Atlantic Canada, published in 1997. And as I mentioned, he has been a member of the board of the Bedeque Area Historical Society since 2012, and our faithful secretary on the board. And just last month, Don had his book, Prince Edward Island Epiquid, a weather and climate almanac of the smallest province in Canada, published by Acorn Press. And Terry Lee Bulger is here tonight with copies of the book for sale. So Don, I welcome you tonight to talk on that particular subject, Prince Edward Island's Climate Almanac and related topics. So, thank you. You're welcome.
So I'm going to borrow one of Colby's yardsticks, so anybody got a hand. We used to have some teachers in Freetown when I went to school there. J.B. Lewis was one. He wasn't never my teacher. But they wouldn't mind taking a strap or a stick like this to you if you were acting up. You wouldn't get away with it anymore. Anyway, moving on. That mouse doesn't work.
Yeah. If you just use the arrows there on the...
Here? This here?
Yeah. Back and forth. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Which one did you press?
I pressed the ball.
Okay, there we go. So as I was a boy growing up on the farm in Freetown, of course, on your farm, everything depends on the weather. So, and the weather and climate have been important to a place like PEI. And survival by our First Nation people who came here and the early settlers was dependent upon knowing about the weather and knowing about the climate and how they gathered their food and other things. So, and I think it's important to record how the weather and climate of this province existed, or what was there when the first humans came here and lived here. And of course, climate controls everything we do, how we build our roads, how we build our buildings, our houses, infrastructure, and how we even dress every day. My wife asks me all the time when I'm going out, what's the weather like? Do I need to put a jacket on? So this is the kind of thing that you're into. So a good understanding of how our climate is changing can help us adapt to our way of life. So the idea of an almanac has a bit of a history to it. The first one that I could find in the records was from 1836, recorded by Reverend L.C. Jenkins of Charlottetown, and he recorded some daily observations of the weather in this almanac. So there is a bit of a history to it. And then, of course, the weather does impact our lives, and the climate has been of interest. When you look at some of the reports from the early French explorers and the British sailors that came here, they reported back to their homelands, what the weather was like here, what the climate was like, so to try to get settlers to come here. And our weather is influenced by air masses coming from central Canada and also from the southern U.S. and the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico. And of course, our temperature, because we're an island, and our climatic conditions are affected by ocean waters. And of course, our primary industries are agriculture, fishing, and tourism, all shaped by climate and weather factors. And even our recreational leisure activities is vital to happiness and fulfillment. I have some grandchildren arriving here probably tomorrow, and they'll want to know what the weather's going to be like. So you can see here where our location is here. So you can see that the Atlantic Ocean is much bigger than we are. So you think of all that mass of water out there. So that gives you an idea how much the water temperature and the currents in that ocean can affect us and eastern Canada. So that's just a picture you need to think about. And another thing that people get confused about is weather and climate. Like, people will talk about the weather, but but that's only what's happening today or maybe the next few days. Climate is a longer period. It's over 30 years. You get climate normals that are produced by Environment Canada and in the US by NOAA, which are 30-year climate normals. And Islanders like talking about the weather. So David Wheel gave me some quotes. The first person says, "Nice day for a change." "Yeah, but that bright sun is awful hard in the eyes." I always like to put a little negative spin. It's hard to get tired of the island because the weather changes so frequently. Island weather used to be 10 months of winter and 2 of tough sledding. But people notice this. He said, this person, he said, "I'm really minding the heat this summer. I've never been this old when it was this hot." So people, winter on the island is like the company you're glad to see, but ruin it by staying too long. And in the 1930s, the snow was often so deep that you had to watch your horse's head going underneath the power lines and the telephone wires. So some of the early weather observations, the first humans, of course, were the Mi'kmaq people, and who, according to legends that they were here when the Ice Age was still sort of dissipating, but beginning about 10,000 years ago. And they produced a lunar calendar. So you can see on that lunar calendar, there's 13 sort of seasons, but they have things like the maple sugar moon, the egg-laying moon, frogs croaking moon, summer moon, leaves budding time, fur shedding moon. So all of that's how they described the weather. So they had their own system for documenting the calendar. And I thought, I'll look into Bedeque, because Bedeque is a Mi'kmaq word, and it means sunny camping place or the hot place. So the Mi'kmaq gave it that name. So why do you think they gave it that name? Because they thought this was a nice warm spot, especially in the summer when they were fishing. So the early settlers and the Loyalist families did well at Bedeque, and there's a report there from the 1792 edition of the Royal Gazette. Throughout the season of the year was not apparently favorable. The produce has been very abundant. In the small settlement of Bedeque alone, upwards of 3,000 bushels of winter and summer wheat have been gathered in, besides a great quantity of other grain. So things were going pretty well back in those days. So one of the first people to keep actual records and bring instruments was a fellow by the name of Samuel Holland. And if you know anything about island history, you'll know who he is. He was an explorer, British explorer, who was born in Holland. Anyway, he had some set up over in Rocky Point, Observation Cove, he called it, and for 74 days, this is what he recorded about the weather. You can see the graphs on there. So he was the first one. And then there was another chap by the name of Thomas Wright, who was actually a surveyor who worked with Samuel Holland. And so he kept these records here. You can see there for 3 years in 1784, 1783, 84, 1785. 3 complete years of weather records captured by Mr. Wright. And I actually got that information from a fellow by the name of George Wright. And if you know George Wright and if you know Campbell, the canning plant that used to be here, he had something to do with that. So George was instrumental in helping me find that. And then if you look through the newspaper records, and of course I found this in the the PEI Register newspaper from 1825 and 1826. There was a complete year where records were kept, and that happened to be a warm year. You can see the average temperature there in July was 21.6, the average temperature for July, and the month just finished, July of 2025. I did the stats on that over the weekend, and actually in Summerside there was I have a reading of 22.1, so it was similar, not that much warmer than it was in 1825. But here are some early weather record keepers. Sorry, I'm getting a little dry here. So we have Samuel Holland, And you see, we've talked about him. We have others here, Henry Condell, who lived in Charlottetown, Dr. John Matheson, who was a medical doctor, and so he kept records. And then this fellow on the bottom there, he was up in Kildare area, and he kept records. So there was lots of people, and there's an Arthur Newberry, the lower right there, from Charlottetown. He kept records. And these were all in the 1800s, 1800s. So in this record here, another source of information was diaries. So you can see here, there's a long list of names here, but to see the one on the top there's Elizabeth Reeves. She was from Freetown. And there's another one here called the Will Scott Farm Diaries, which was the lower Freetown. They kept diaries, and you can see the time period they kept it from the late 1890s up until 1980 something. So you can see the period there. So, and you can see it started with the French accounts by Pichon, but there's Samuel Holland, William Drummond, Thomas Wright, all these people over the years, Reverend Jenkins, Henry Condell, and all through the years. So, but these people kept records, so you can extract from those what the weather was like. And so then there are other volunteer observers, and this fellow here, he was from down around Alliston, St. Peter's Road, down near Murray River, and his name was Michael Radvani, and he was a tobacco farmer that moved here from Ontario to grow tobacco, but they somehow convinced him to start keeping records. And then you might recall George Reed from Borden. George was a member of this board for a number of years, and that's George attending to his Davis Vantage Pro 2 weather instrument. And he was very meticulous about making sure that thing was working right. And when I was there I happened to catch him tuning her up one day when I was there. So that's how I got that picture. So some people say, well, yeah, the temperature doesn't change. Climate change isn't a real thing. It's just hogwash. And you hear that, a lot of that south of the border. But anyway, but you can see the mean temperature. And we had records going back to 1850 for Charlottetown. So you can see here the graph, and that red dotted line is what I call the trend line, and it shows the gradual increase of the average annual temperature from 1850 to 2024. And it's gone up over a degree on average during that period. So you may say, well, a degree, that's not much. Well, it is. It's a lot when you're thinking about growing crops and things. And then you can look at it by month. And so you have the extreme high temperature every month, the average temperature, and the low temperature. And you can see all of them have an upward trend since 1850. So the low temperature is not as cold as it used to be. The hotter temperatures are getting warmer, and the average temperature, so everything is increasing. And so then we go to February. I just picked a couple of months here, and you got the same thing. The trend of all those is going up. The highest temperature you get in the month, the lowest temperature you get in the month are all, except the lowest temperature is not decreasing, it's increasing. And then this is March. March is kind of level, but you can see there that the temperatures are still rising. So a lot of people talk about the hot spots on PEI. Where is the hottest spots? And if you listen to the CBC meteorologist, he's always talking about a place called Maple Plains. Yeah. Well, do you see Maple Plains on that list anywhere? When your pool of weather stations is limited to 6 or 7 that are operated by Environment Canada, you really can't get a full picture. But you notice one place that comes up very frequently, Arlington Orchard. Everybody know where Arlington is? Mm-hmm. Well, Barry Balsam, I keep telling Barry Balsam, he owns, I said, there's a lot of hot air up around here. I said, it must be you, I guess. So anyway, but you can see even in 2025, they had a temperature on June the 24th of this year, 36.6. And the highest ever on PEI that we have a record for is 36.7 at the Charlottetown Department of Agriculture station where the experimental farm used to be. And so And there's another one here, Fox Island, which is where the Elite Seed Farm, they had a temperature of 35.2 in July. So you can see there, Tignish comes up here a couple of times. So western PEI tends to have some of the warmer temperatures. And the coldest spots was Kildare, minus 37.2. So, and you don't see Maple Plains on there either. But the coldest temperatures are Kildare, Bangor, Kilmainham, that's a Scottish name, Ellerslie, St. Nicholas, Tyne Valley, Bangor, Ellerslie. So you can see there that the coldest temperatures we've had, and when they happened, 1784 has been the coldest, minus 37.2. And so then I tabulated, I spent a lot of time doing Excel spreadsheets, but so you look at every day of the year, 366 days of the year, the individual station with the most daily high temperature records was Alliston, down near Murray River. Charlottetown was high, Cable Head, Monticello, Summerside was high. So you can see there, and you can see here the number, these are the stations that I used to compile all that and the number of years of record for each one. So it's based on information I've received off the internet from Environment Canada. And precipitation, the stations with the highest precipitation, Charlottetown leads it there with 92, Georgetown 11, so Charlottetown, Summerside was fairly high. And that's partially because Charlottetown and Summerside have the most weather stations, so they have a tendency to be able to get the more information because there's more stations available. And as far as snowfall totals, Charlottetown by far has the highest number of days with the highest snowfall. So you can see there how the distribution of rain and snow. And now I don't know if anybody here knows much about heating degree days, but heating degree days is what the oil man, when you're ordering oil, they put you on an automatic delivery. Well, they base it on heating degree days. So if your temperature is below 18 degrees Celsius, let's say the average temperature per day was 17 degrees, well, you'd have 1 heating degree days. If your temperature for the day was 0, it would be 18 heating degree days. So that's how you total it. So you can see here that I'm showing here from 1873 to 2024. You can see that's in purple. So there were heating degree days in January. So between 2000 and 2024, it was quite a bit less. So the number of heating degree days is going down because the temperature and the climate is gradually warming, so you don't need as much heat. And on the other side of the equation, you have cooling degree days. So cooling degree days is just the opposite. Like when you have if your temperature, the base temperature is 18, and if you have an average temperature for the day of 19, then it's 1 cooling degree day. So, but you can see here, same scale, orange is 1873 to 2024, and the blue is 2024. And you can see the increase, especially in July and August. We're getting more cooling degree days, and that gives you sort of a cumulative total of the amount of heat that's in the atmosphere. So it gives you a pretty good idea of why we're saying it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And that's the proof. You can't argue with those numbers. And you can see the trend in the heating degree days is going down in January, and in July the trend in the cooling degree days is going up since 1873. So the whole thing is doing what the climate change experts are telling us. It's getting warmer year-round. And growing degree days, now as Percy, Affleck, and Randall are here, and I'm sure there are other farmers here, but they're always interested in the growing degree days. And this tells you for plant growth and crops and things. So you can see the trend has been going up for Charlottetown, and this is how you calculate it. You take your max and your min, divide it by 2, and you subtract your base temperature, which is 5. So when you have an increased number of growing degree days, that means you can grow longer season crops. So some farmers like to grow the netted gems or the long potatoes. So if you have longer growing season, then you can grow longer potatoes. But also, you can find alternate crops like soybeans and canola and all these other crops that we're seeing now. They can maybe be grown here. You see a lot of fruit orchards, and they're growing different fruits. Well, it's based on growing degree days, and also on your frost temperature, the killing frost. Now, here's another one that's interesting, heat waves. We hear a lot of talk these days about heat waves. So this goes back to the 1840s. So you can extract this from newspaper records, and you can see because every time they had a warm summer, they would write it down right in the paper. But you can see that the 1930s and the 1940s were hot decades. It was a dry period of time. And so the 1930s and the 1940s certainly were higher. But look at the 2020s, the last decade, and that's right up to the end of July this year, that graph. And you can see there that we're already exceeded the previous decade total for any decade in the history of this province, and we still have 4.5 years to go on this decade. So you can imagine it's going to be off the chart, off the top. So this is a hot decade. So you can't deny that. That's the facts. Precipitation. So you can see here the precipitation at Charlottetown from 1989 to 2024. Pretty level for the total precip. The rain is in the middle here, and the snow here. So you can see since 1989. There's been less snow overall, except for that one winter of 2015. But you can imagine, we didn't have that. That line would even be sharper down. But then you can see since 1872 to 2024, it's been gradually increasing the amount of precipitation. So, this is interesting to see. And so then we can look at 1 month, and this is March. So March is pretty flat for rain and pretty flat for, everything's pretty flat. Not a lot of change in March. So, it goes to show that some months don't vary a lot. The next one I want to show you is extreme winter snowfall totals. And a lot of this stuff is all in the book. So if you want to get a book, if you can't remember all this, you don't have to. It's in the book. So go see Terry Lee after and buy one. Anyway, Charlottetown Airport, the most snow we ever had was that year we just talked about, 551 centimeters. So you can see here, Charlottetown has had some of the highest years, but there's been, you don't see too much for Summerside here. So it's basically been a Charlottetown and Kings County thing where we get the most snow. And that winter was the most snowfall of any winter ever recorded. And you can see there when the snowfall fell and some pictures that I took would show what it looked like. So for daily extreme rainfall records, you can see on here that the most rain we ever had was on September the 11th, 1942, when we had 163.8 millimeters at Charlottetown. That was the most rain we had in one day. But you can see there's other places on there that had a lot of rain. Foxley River, there was just a few years ago, 2014, December 10th, there was a lot of rain in West Prince. So you can see on there some of those records. So, and of course, when you get those, you get like that one in 2014 we just had a few years ago, 11 years ago. There was about 50 bridges and culverts washouts in Prince County. So it does cause a lot of problems when you get a lot of rain coming all at once. And I just wanted to look for some stuff about Bedeque. So this is a tragedy on Bedeque Bay in January the 16th, 1855. Eliza Johnson, now she was a relative of mine. She was, my mother was a Johnson from Bedeque here, Brewer Johnson, and Blanche Jardine Blanche Jardine was my mother, and she was Brewer's daughter. So then this Eliza and Nancy Robbins, they died in a snowstorm when they were riding on a horse and sleigh on the ice from Bedeque Bay between Summerside and Bedeque. They'd gone to Summerside with Thomas Robbins, Jr., who was Eliza's boyfriend and Nancy's brother. And another sister, Mary Robbins, survived. They were returning home when they got caught in a storm, lost their way in the bay, went off course from the bushes that were marked in the course. And of course they went into open water. And the horse and the girls went down. So there was a tragedy. There was a 12-foot wide opening. And you can see that sort of, I kind of went back to a Bayfield map from 1841 that I found. And you can sort of see that I tried to mark out a sort of a tentative path for that journey, how they traveled. Because they traveled by horse and sleigh. There was no basic road to Summerside that would be plowed that time of year. And there was no vehicles, of course. It was a horse and sleigh business. Then we had Tropical Storm Hannah in September of 08. And this was North River Road in Charlottetown. And you can see the flood. There was 90 millimeters of rain, or 88 millimeters of rain in 4 hours. And that's what it caused. Gates Creek overflowed. And the same day in Cornwall, the Trans-Canada Highway, which is now Main Street, that got washed out near St. Francis of Assisi Church. But the culvert there was designed for a 1 in 50-year storm event, and we had basically a 1 in 100-year storm event, and the culverts were half full of mud and dirt anyway. Then we had this other storm called the Great Atlantic Storm of January 21st and 22nd, 2000. In Charlotte, and you can see what the barometric pressures and everything looked like for that storm. And so as a result of that storm, we had the highest water level ever recorded in Charlottetown was on January the 21st, 2000 at 2.89 meters above mean sea level. So it tells you like 3 meters or 10 feet. So the water was 10 feet higher than this building above normal levels. Wow. So, like at the yacht club, have you ever been to the yacht club in Charlotte? You should go down there. They just raised that building 1 meter, and they raised the parking lot 1 meter because they don't want to get flooded again, and this is partially why, because of this storm. And they've had other storms since then. And Lobster on the Wharf at foot of Prince Street, it got flooded too. They raised that building 1 meter. So like we're having to adapt to climate change because of sea level rise and the impacts from these storms. And you can see here records of all the high water level events in Charlottetown. That's above geodetic, which is not, it's actually above mean sea level. And the high winds and the high waves, I mean, you can see these waves, that's a 30-foot cliff. Their waves are going right over the top of the cliff at Cavendish. And this is Oyster Bed Bridge, and that road was closed for several days because it got hammered. And I crossed that bridge a half an hour before they closed it. That's when I got the picture. Remember I mentioned the storm up in Foxley River when they had all that 180 millimeters of rain in 36 hours? Well, this is what the Huntley Bridge looked like afterwards. So the bridge was completely wiped out. And if you see that, that watershed area there, so they had 180 millimeters of rain over 20.5 square kilometers. That equals 3.69 million cubic meters of water. That's a lot of water to go through a bridge and under a bridge. And that's what, and because it wasn't designed for that, that's what happened to the bridge. And the same day, the road between O'Leary and Milburn, it looked like this after that rain. And this is where a car ended up. A fellow was coming home from playing hockey in O'Leary, and he well, it's not funny. He drove over this, and then the current carried him into the woods and put his car up against a tree. He wasn't injured. And then there was another storm at Charlottetown on September 22nd, and this is what it looked like. You can see this right near Holland College, and that a student was going to class and had to take his boots and everything off to go to class. And they had this constant problem there, that area near Joe Gibbs Park on Lower Grafton Street. It's a bad area for flooding. And then another thing that happens, you get ice rafting. So this is up in Maximville. You know where Maximville is?
Yeah.
George Arsenault is here, I'm sure he knows.
Next to Abrams Village.
Next to Abrams Village. So this is a picture taken by the Geologic Survey of Canada, Don Forbes, but you can see the ice rafted right up against the cottage and started smashing things. So you can get that happening too. You get a high tide and the ice rafts, and it just happened again just past February. Pictures from the Abrams Village, or no, Egmont Wharf. Ice storm of 1956. Anybody here remember that?
Yes.
Do you?
Me? No, I don't. But this is the telephone lines are all down this part of the island. This was a report that came out from Island Tel. And so that was January the 6th to the 8th of 1956. And I have pictures from Nora Scales from Freetown of Scales Hydro. They had damage of their power lines too. But this is Summerside. I got this picture from Hexford Studio. But this shows the main street, Water Street in Summerside during that storm. So you can see there what the ice looked like. And I talked to an Ernie McKay from Maritime Electric, who came up from Charlottetown, because everybody from Charlottetown was told to get up to Sherbrooke in Summerside. And he said he went out in a truck, and they were at the end of Granville Street, and he said they watched the telephone poles go down like dominoes. Just click, 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 all the way down the road. And just once one went down, the whole thing went down. And then after, the day after, or 2 days after, there was a snowstorm. So then they had to dig the poles and all the equipment out of the snow, and the ground hadn't been frozen before this, so they couldn't put the big trucks in the fields, so a lot of it had to be dug out by hand. So you can imagine what that would be like. So we don't have any idea today. We think we're having inconvenience. Well, sometimes I say we don't have a clue. Hurricane Juan. This shows you here the canopy at the Irving on the Riverside Drive, right down by the Irving boat plants. And I don't know, have you ever heard tell of Lillian Elliott from Victoria? I actually had the opportunity to interview her before she passed away. But here she is, her house and that house is still there down by the lobster, the wharf in Victoria. She's nobody living in it now. But she was flooded 4 times by storm surges. And one of them was during Hurricane Juan. And she said to me, she said, you know, Don, she said, the only thing good about Hurricane Juan and that flood, she said, at least the water was warm. She could get out of bed, like the water came into her bedroom, and she was right up to her mattress also. The fire department had to rescue her every time. But at least the water was warm, and that's what she said. Nice lady. Anyway, and Fiona, of course, we can't talk about storms unless we talk about Fiona, but here's a house out in Doyle's Cove Beach in French Village. Here's before Fiona, and that's what it looked like after. So people don't have a clue unless they have a cottage and they think, oh, well, that's not going to happen around here. Well, how do you know it's not going to happen? You know, all the storm has to come in from the south or from another direction, and it could be your cottage if you're on the shore. But you can see here, between July 14th and October the 5th, that's how much the shoreline changed. This is taken by drone footage from UPEI drone team. But you can see that line here where the shoreline was, or where it is, or where it was before. And so that's what it looked like. And you can see there, they were taking measurements from stakes on the ground. And you can see the far side of the ground where it dips down, 40% of the total erosion of that coastline since 1984 was due to Fiona. So Fiona was a massive storm, which hit mainly the north coast of PEI. And the Hebrides, well, I mean, I'm sure you know people that have cottages down there, but one thing I do after storms, I go out and measure high water marks, and so it measures the height that the water can in. You measure that from the loss line or the rack line, so you can see how high the water. You just take a measurement there with a high-level precision survey instrument, and this is, you can reprofile then where how high the water came in. And you can see all these cottages, that there was 13 cottages lost. Well, no wonder. They were all in a flood zone.
Yeah.
No. So it tells me that they should never have been built there to begin with. But anyway, that's hindsight. And here's a picture that I got from Chris Wall. His mother actually gave me this. This is the lower New Annan Road. That's what it looked like during Fiona. So you can see that it wouldn't be nice driving there. And of course, Crystal Beach Campground after Fiona it no longer is there because it was completely wiped And I want to talk about tornadoes. How am I doing for time? Okay. So the people say, well, PEI, you don't have tornadoes there. Yes, we do. We did. So July the 3rd, 1974, there was one in near Charlottetown, Sleepy Hollow, and a lot of mobile homes were flipped over, and a lot of damage done, right near where we live. Like, we live in Winslow, so it wasn't too far from our house. But the first record of a tornado at PEI is actually at Bedeque. I don't know if you ever knew that before, but a whirlwind passed over Bedeque on Thursday the 26th, 1839, and did a lot of damage, 80 yards in width. A new house belonging to Joseph Siliker. Now, somebody say, well, who's Joseph Siliker? Well, he was married to a Jane Skierman, and then he married another Jane, I forget her last name, but anyway, maybe I wrote it down here. Jane Colbeck. Yeah, that's right. She was the daughter, Jane Skierman, his first wife was the daughter of William Skierman and Elizabeth Hyatt, but Jane Colbeck was the daughter of Phillips Morris Colbeck. So, but that's basically where their house was, and you can see where the mill was. So you can see here, a new house belonging to Joseph was blown down. A joiner who was at work in it fortunately escaped unhurt. A barn containing all his hay and grain was also leveled to the ground. It also passed Mr. Hooper's, lifting a large frame barn, disposing 15 feet from the blocks. So you can read the whole story there, but a number of fences were uplifted, pickets were seen twirling in the air like straws, and the large trees bent down like saplings before the fury. So you can see there was a tornado that hit Bedeque in 1839. And then Albany, in June 14th, 1935, Twister struck 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers west of Albany and stopped beyond the village. And it leveled a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to read all that. Fred Hooper was working on a tractor and he hid underneath it. And the cyclone passed over him and he held on to the mud guards. And then there was a young boy was lifted up in the air and carried. He was holding a chicken. And he picked them off the ground and carried them 100 feet and dropped them 100 feet away, unharmed. He or the chicken didn't get hurt. So these events did occur, and the Environment Canada wouldn't call it a tornado because they don't have official records, but you can tell from the damage that it done and what it did that it was a tornado. We don't have any miles per hour to record the actual strength of it, but this gives you an idea of what has happened. So, and these are real people, and it's said there that somewhere it talks about it being not far from Middleton, so to the northwest in Middleton. And then there was the Kennedy inaugural storm on January the 20th, 1961, and it tracked into Atlantic Canada. It was during the inauguration of John F. Kennedy at the same time. But there was a vehicle, many cars and vehicles got stuck on the roads, and an 81-year-old man from Borden, A.P. Soretti, died in his car when he became stranded in a snowbank at Middleton. So just to put a little sort of local twist on it, I mean, a school bus driver, Sterling Baker, became stuck in the snow on the Hermitage Road with 18 pupils on board and had to remain on the bus overnight. And then there was a storm surge that day at Mount Stewart, and Earl J's pigs got out of the barn and they were swimming down Main Street. So you can imagine what that would look like. So you can see a lot of these things happened, and it's because of changes to our climate. Groundhog Day in 1976. So it had winds gusting to 145 kilometers an hour at Somerset Airport. And there was only less than a centimeter of snow. Of course, the ferries were off. Several mobile homes and aircrafts were overturned. Many buildings lost. Borden Elementary School lost its roof. Lower Freetown School had to close as it couldn't get over 56 degrees. Smelt shacks were blown across Somerset Harbour. 8 barns lost at St. Chrysostom. But if you look at the Will Scott Farm Diaries, as recorded by Georgie Cairns, heavy rain, high winds up to 90 miles an hour, roofs blown off, burns, Ken McLean, Helio Peterson, Norman Law, Robert Jardine, Leslie Reeves, and Percy Affleck. And Percy was telling about this last week at the Colvick's event, where Billy Colvick delivered a load of lumber after the burn blew down from the storm. He was building a new burn. Is that right, Percy?
Pardon?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yes. But anyway, so that's, I mean, so that was a major storm, and that one there didn't have a lot of snow with it, just wind. And then there was another storm, between February and March of 1982. Georgie Cairns noted in her diaries, and that's records of what she wrote. But anyway, she lived on the Cairns Road, and the schools were on and off and closed for several days there. And I'm not going to read all the details, but people living in rural areas like Lower Freetown, it was a common occurrence. You know, the plowing equipment. There were not a lot of snow blowers, so it took a long time to get the roads cleared of that. But you can see there some of the comments that she had in her diary. So yeah, there were schools blown down in that one too. Then there was the Groundhog Day storm of 1992. Now, I went to school with a gal by the name of Kathy Lewis from Freetown. She was actually South Freetown, but she came to the school in Upper Freetown, we called it. But anyway, she was about due to deliver a baby, and then the night of the storm, as it was starting, she went into labor at her house, where Edwin Lewis lived in Freetown. So they called the ambulance to come. So they had to have an escort of 2 snowplows and a maintainer. And her father, Edwin, had to get on the phone to make the arrangements. And he called Kenny off the Wahoo boys, and he came with the maintainer, and they escorted the ambulance and the doctor and a nurse on board. They left Summerside at 8:30 on February the 1st and got there at 2:40 on February the 2nd. In the morning. It took 6 hours. So a trip would take 15 minutes maybe. So anyway, when the baby arrived, and she called her best friend, Barbara Reeves, and then she had a bit of a job because Ronnie Ferris took her on a snowmobile, and they were taking their chances going because they had whiteout conditions. So you can just imagine the chain reactions, things like this. So anyway, Scott Cameron gave advice of how to deliver everything on the phone. And the baby was called Stormy Michael Warren Kennedy. Anyway, and I got that picture. It's not the picture from that storm, but Eric Campbell gave me that. It's a picture of a snowplow at Bedeque in 1987. So it shows you what the snow was like. And trying to move snow with that kind of piece of equipment with, you know, no snow blower, it's not a fun job. I remember when I was in Freetown sometimes, when I was a kid, you'd go out, Henry Reeves used to drive the plow. They had one of those old maintainers, and he'd come down the road from the church at the corner there, and he'd hit the snowbank, and he'd move it about 3 inches. And then he'd back up and ram again. And then they get halfway down, and then they got stuck. You know, so it wasn't a lot of fun, right, for people. So water spouts, that's another thing that we get with tornadoes, but water spouts are basically same thing as a tornado, but it happens over water. And here's what one looked like. Jennifer Neal gave me this picture from Canoe Cove. But you can see the water swirling in there, but you can see the shape of the tornado. And Marie Ford gave me this picture from the Confederation Bridge. She and her friend Jenkins were working on the bridge, and they were told that there was a water spout right off the side of the bridge. And that's a picture of the water spout. So they were told to get down off their ladder because they're putting up a sign, because if she went to the sign station. Anyway, so that gives you an idea of what it looks like. And if that had ever gone over where they were putting the sign, I mean, they could have been in the water pretty quick. And then there was this Francis Bain of York Point. He's a naturalist, and it's certainly worth, if you ever have a chance to read any of his journals, but he describes in great detail here the very heavy cloud, and then he described how dark and heavy, and he goes into quite a quite a lot of detail. I'm not going to read all that. But it was 20 yards in diameter, 500 yards high. Its center masses of condensed vapor could be seen rising sharply in a spiral manner. And then there was a tremendous fall of rain. So that was in 1877. And that's in his journal that you can find at the archives. So it gives you an idea, you know, how, like, people living in that time, but, you know, it was a major catastrophe that some of this would happen. It could have caused a lot of damage. And I just wanted to give another plug for the book. This is the, it has daily climate record. So for June the 1st, it tells you the temperature, the highest temperature ever recorded in Bedeque. This one was actually at Maple Plains. And then the minimum temperature was at Alliston, and the most rain was at New Glasgow, and so on and so on. So if you're ever, it'd be good if you're going to have a PEI trivia contest. You can get a lot of information out of this book that'll help you create trivia questions. And I thought I'd end it off with a couple of slides from the current day. So I'm still involved in putting up weather stations, and so in July, the farmers are quite concerned about rainfall. But this shows you, a lot of people have this idea, especially those who come here from other provinces, oh, well, your weather can't be that much different, you're such a small island. So look at this. So this is, the deeper the blue, the more rain. So this is the most, you know, the most rain was up here at 85 millimeters for the month of July. But look at some of these other places, you know, 35, 28. So the eastern end of the island got hardly any, but the farmers up here were quite happy because they got barely enough rain. But you can see there is quite a variety in the rainfall. And so, you know, but it does vary across the province depending on how the storm systems go and what kind of storms we're getting. And then also for the temperature, so we talked about hot spots earlier. Well, in July of 2025, that's just a few days ago, you can see the hottest areas were up here: Arlington, Cox Island, you know, Hog Island. We have a weather station on Hog Island. The Mi'kmaq, they had one there. And you can see there the temperatures were up to 35, 30, the high temperatures. And the same down here in Kings County. Maple Plains hit 33, I think, yeah, 33. But you can see there was quite a few above that in other parts of the island. So when Environment Canada and J Scotland don't have any weather stations south of there, like they don't have any stations down in this area, so they have no clue what the temperatures were there. So this is why it's important to have stations all over the island so you can get a full picture, not just half a picture. So that's another point I'd like to make. So after having said all that, I guess Terry Lee's left, has she?
No, I'm here.
Oh, she's still here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're standing over there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to thank a number of people. My wife Ann, who's here, she's been put up with me working on this book for quite a few years. What are you doing down in that office? Been down there all the time. And my editor, Hope Parnham, I don't know, she came to my launch I had in Charlottetown, but she did all the graphic design for the book and laid out the pictures and graphs and prettied it up. I got the raw data, but you know, you wouldn't want to see the book if I had the final decision and everything. Terry Lee Belger of Acorn Fest, I'd like to thank her very much. She helped sponsor the book and send it for publication, and by all means, buy a copy if you're interested. And Josh McFadgen, the forward that's in the book, he's with the institute, or he's with the university at UPI, so he gave me a good forward in the book. Dr. Adam Fennick, who I did the weather trivia calendar with, he's now in Dubai. But all the volunteer observers, like I showed those pictures of George Reed and others at the start, but without people actually recording this stuff and putting in their diaries and taking the time, I mean, we wouldn't know a lot of what we know now. So it's very important, if you are so inclined, it's never too late to start recording stuff. And of course, the Bedeque Historical Society for hosting the event. So a couple of quotes to end. What Islanders enjoy most about a nice day is talking about it. It used to be the news followed by the weather, but now the weather pretty much is the news. So, thank you very much. Yeah?
Any questions for Don? And in the meantime, if you want to buy a book while the meeting is going on, feel free. Questions?
Yeah.
No.
Do you have a name for a meteorologist that lives in PEI and forecasts the weather? And if we don't, why not?
Do we have a name for what?
The meteorologist. It comes out of Halifax, doesn't it? The weather report.
Oh, the weather reports. Well, Environment Canada, their head office is out of Dartmouth. Yeah. Used to be a fellow by the name of Jim Abraham. Used to be the person in charge of that, but I don't know who's the chief person now. But Environment Canada used to have a lot more stations on PEI. They closed a lot of them down, and they said that 7 was enough for PEI, but they can have 700 in Ontario. But anyway, yeah, yes.
You didn't mention the Yankee Gale. Is that important in the history of?
Oh, for sure. I had to pick and choose what storms I was going to mention. I tried to get more centered on Bedeque for tonight's talk, but certainly the Yankee Gale. And a lot of people have asked me, what's the worst storm that they ever had on PEI? Was it the Yankee Gale? Edward MacDonald may say the August Gale of 1873. I had a fellow argue with me or put his position that October the 1st, 1923. In my humble opinion, I think it's Fiona. Just the extent of the damage. Like, the thing with the Yankee Gale is that they didn't have the forecasting system. So they didn't, they were out on the water and they were in sailboats. So, I mean, they got caught on the north coast of PEI and a northeaster hit. And some of them made it around to the southern or the western shore of PEI, but the ones that didn't, they ended up on Hog Island or, the Sand Hills in London, so I don't know. But the Yankee Gale was certainly, there were more deaths. There's no deaths during Fiona. But then again, Fiona was during a warm time of the year.
Was there a lot of destruction on the island?
From the Yankee Gale? Well, it's hard to piece that together. We know that there was trees down and there was flooding, like there was a report I read in the McNutt diary up in Darnley where the water came up into the fields, potato fields. So there was a high tide too. But again, they didn't have a lot of roads in those days and the bridges were low to the water. It's a completely different sort of environment today compared to back then. So it's hard to compare the two. I would say the Yankee Gale certainly was a huge and a bad storm. That's about all I can say. And the damage, there was a lot of damage, but...
What time of the year was it?
October. Yeah, and Fiona was in September. Then Dorian was 2019. It was in September too.
First week.
Yeah, any other questions?
This is probably another one. But just thinking of the bridges, you said they were lower at that time, like back in 1851. Did they sort of, now they build them higher, and you suppose that's just because they want the road to be more level, or did they learn that, hey, it's better to have them higher so they don't flood?
Yeah, no, I can answer that. The Department of Transportation, like that storm of, there was a bad storm December 21st, 2010. And they lost a lot of bridges, like the Oyster Bed Bridge Rustico Bill Bridge. And both of those bridges have been raised a meter. And the one in Rustico Bill was just moved, or just raised a couple of years ago. The Surrey Causeway Bridge has been raised a meter. They are raising all the bridges now by a meter. And you may say, well, that's not much. Well, the cost to do that, the approach, the bridge not only has to be high, you have to have a smooth flow from the approach. So all that fill has to be brought in. And it's an expensive operation. So, but as far as I know, they have a policy now that they're going to raise all the bridges 1 meter. Like the Confederation Bridge, when it was built in the 1990s, they built it to last 2100. And so they built it 1 meter higher than they normally would have built a bridge because of the climate change projections at the time. And today, if they were building that bridge again, it may even be higher. Yeah?
If you fly or drive around Prince Edward Island, you see a lot of rock gabions protecting shoreline.
Yeah?
Like a lot, and a lot of money being spent on it. And it seems to me from interviews that I've heard with Dr. Fennick over the years that it doesn't work. And I'm not sure if I understood it right. Like it works when it works, and then you get a storm surge. And and the province, I thought, put a moratorium on it, but I imagine there's quite a bit of pushback on that. Has the Climate Lab done any research on that, or?
Yes, we have. Yeah, like before Fiona, before Dorian, actually, Hope Parnham, who did my graphic design work, she started doing a PhD on shoreline protection on the coast of PEI. So we actually flew the entire coast. I went up on a plane with her, and we took pictures of the entire coast of PEI. And then she tabulated the areas that were protected with cement, concrete, or whatever, imported armor rock, island sandstone, brush, straw bales, cement blocks. People would put anything on the beach. Now during Fiona, on the north coast of PEI, I think I'm safe in saying there was not one shoreline protection system that wasn't overtopped. And there was even a green shoreline that was installed at Savage Harbor at Pigot's Point was wiped out. The water came in so high that it went over the top of everything that had been put there, and it backwashed it from behind. So you get that undercutting underneath the bank. You get the pushback from the water that went over the top. Crowbush Golf Course is a good example. I don't know how many millions they spent trying to protect that, and they still cut the grass right up to the cliff. But we haven't learned a lot in terms of that. But if we're going to try to fight climate change, we're going to have to get smarter. Because what we're doing, it's like putting Lego blocks on the shore sometimes, I think. So, maybe I'm being a little too critical, but from what I've seen, and I just finished going around on the plane again. I just finished. Was up on the plane this past week. Last Friday was up again, and we did last Monday we did West Prince again. And we did the North Cape. So we're going to have that new information now to compare with previous. But that's one of the best ways to see it is get an oblique photo side view of the coast, and then you can see what's on the base of the cliff. Because if you take the pictures from a satellite or a plane going right overhead, you can't actually see the face of the cliff, so you can't see what's on there. So you have to go the oblique 45-degree angle. So that's how you can actually see what's on there. And I'll tell you one thing, cement blocks and cement slabs are really, I think you're just wasting your time. Unless you have not a high energy wave environment. Yeah, people need to understand the wave energy that's involved in when during Fiona, they measured a wave off the north coast of PEI between here and the Magdalene Islands, 9.9 meters high.
Really?
And then when I went out after Fiona, I measured a wave, where a wave hit down in Goose River, 6.1 meters above normal. It hit the side of a cottage, a cliff that high. and tore the siding off the cottage, and it was over 6 meters above sea level, normal sea level. So, like, you have to understand that that's what you're up against. Like, if you're on an inner coast, like I did some walking along the shoreline of Cornwall, York Point area, you don't get the big waves in there because you're not on the outer coast. Like, you're not on the Gulf of St. Lawrence where you are on the whole North Shore PEI. But if you're in an estuary, like inside the Charlotte Harbor, you don't get 6 meter waves in there. You might get a 1 meter wave. So it's a whole different dynamic. That's what people need to understand.
We were getting in Shelton with Fiona, coming up at the top of the cottages, on the top of the bank.
Yeah.
They were coming right up above.
And how big is the bank there?
What would it be?
Well, there was a lot lost.
No, but the bank would be about 10 feet, like over where Heath is. It would be 10 feet high.
Oh, oh, yeah.
And then it was coming up,
Yeah.
it was coming up to over their cottages.
I was out to Randall's farm field there in Lower Bedeque after Fiona, and because it was the north-facing shorelines that got hit the hardest. And even inside Bedeque Bay, even that north coast along Randall's farm there was some major damage. You lost a lot of soil there in some places.
Well, we don't own the field, but we farm it. And I went in, I knew it was going to be a big storm, so I measured 5 feet in and was putting the stake, and I said, there's a bigger storm than that, so I went 20 feet, and they lost 15 feet. And it wasn't a really high bank. I couldn't believe it, but anyhow, it took quite a bite, and we lost a lot on our own farm,
But you saw the picture I had up there of the difference from the cottage after the other. Like, some cottages down in Hickots Point, Savage River lost 80 feet one storm. Lost 80 feet of shoreline.
Yeah.
West Point Lighthouse would be another one that,
Yeah.
they lost all like right up to the lighthouse.
Yeah, and they spent a lot of money. I'd like to know how much money the government has spent on West Point, protecting that lighthouse and Cedar Dunes Park. And you know that Cedar Dunes Park, the elevation there is like less than 3 meters above sea level. So they're going to get every storm, even with those breakwaters there. The breakwaters don't stop flooding. They may break the waves, but the water was still coming around them. They don't stop flooding. Yeah.
In your opinion, in how many years will the island be divided into two islands?
It's a good question, George. My daughter did a project when she was going to, what grade was she in? Time 6, maybe? She did a project. She did a map of PEI. She just took a topographical map. And when the water level got up to 5 meters above sea level, the island divided into 3. And it was like when you go by Portage, and then another one's down near Hillsborough River, where the Hillsborough River crosses over to Savage Harbor in that area. So yeah, if you get a 5 meter storm surge, you could get the island splitting into 3 different islands. And another one is West Prince is a kind of a dangerous spot, like because like I got that the day that the eclipse of the sun. I went to North Cape, and coming home, that road, the road between Days Corner and Musquesh, was backed up for miles. So if you had a major storm surge and you were trying to get out of West Prince, how are you going to get out?
I have a question about sea ice in winter freezing.
Yeah.
The Gulf of St. Lawrence does not freeze over as much as it did in the past.
Yeah.
And how is this, well, perhaps you don't know, but how is it affecting the harp seal population in the Gulf that has been there since pre-European times?
Well,
They breed on the ice, they haul out on the ice, and I think there have been years when there's no ice for them to haul out on, isn't
yeah, that's true. Like there's a gal at Genevieve Keefe from Kingora. She was a Keefe from Kingora, and her father was the acting president for a while. Great. So she did a master's on sea ice, and she just plotted it. And we did her and I made a presentation to the Snowmobile Association of North America a couple of months ago in Charlottetown. But she showed a picture of the shrinkage of the sea ice, and I think there's, I forget what, 50-some days less of sea ice in the last 30 years, or the sea ice. And there's a guy from Summerside, I couldn't put that slide up. He's a doctor, Richard Wedge. You know Richard Wedge? Well, Dick Wedge gave me he was tabulating when the sea came in, or the ice came in Summerside Harbor for 30 years. And I could show you the graph, but I think it's in the book. But anyway, if not, I can get it for you. But I mean, like the sea ice is decreasing, and the seal pups, like I've got pictures taken many years ago, seal pups on the beach at Brackley and at Rustico. But if you go and try to get a picture of a seal pup on a beach today, let me know if you find one. But I'm not a biologist. My daughter may be better equipped than that. She's a wildlife biologist. But anyway.
Well, any other questions from the floor? Well, thank you, Don, for that very interesting talk. It's of current concern to us all, and also into the future. As we know, the climate is changing every year, or getting warmer. This will bring about big changes in the shoreline of Prince Edward Island. So let's give Dawn
I just want to make a few announcements. We have next Sunday is our 4th annual blueberry ice cream social in the park across from here. I think the weather already is predicted to be good. I heard on the forecast that the next 2 weeks are going to be without rain almost. Whether you can rely on that or not. So do come along and support the Bedeque Area Museum. There's musical entertainment, and Dawn and I will be out picking the blueberries. We'll have to arrange that sometime for this week. There's one more talk in this series, and that is myself. I will be talking about time in the island and how our ancestors coped with the problem of measuring time and the use of clocks, and how some of the legislation that was involved in regulating time over even up until the 1960s. So that is the last of our talks. We have also raffle tickets for sale here. It's a seafood raffle. We've been having those for about 4 years. The top prize is $250 seafood voucher from Waddell's Fish Mart in Summerside. Second prize is $125 worth of oysters, prime oysters from Future Seafood in Fernwood. And third prize, $50 voucher from Waddell's Fish Mart. Tickets are $5 each, or 3 for $10, and all proceeds go to help the museum continue the work, including these talks. We appreciate your donations. We don't charge for the talks, but any donation you can give is much appreciated. And I think those are the memberships, of course, of the museum are available for purchase. Quite a number of you are already members. And again, that is $25 for individuals and $30 for families. We have refreshments at the back, juice and cookies, so do partake in that. And remember that Dawn's book is for sale. You can browse through it and decide whether you will purchase a copy and look at the many illustrations and diagrams and statistics on weather in it. So Dawn is sitting here willing to sign copies if you buy one. So, thank you all for coming, and I think I've covered everything, haven't I? So, and again, let's express our appreciation to Don. And you can also take a chance to look at the exhibits.